people who are not able to attend tonight, but they wanted to follow some of the discussions. So I hope you don't mind that. So the CLLD profiles, as you will hopefully or have already seen on our website, are the unique source of information of how CLLD is implemented in different member states. And I would like to ask Stefan Carr, who is our board member and has been one of the key brains behind that exercise, to present his analysis and his overview.
Thank you.
Over to you, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you, Ursula. And the brains, that is scary. Yeah. Yeah, and also the recording started, so I have to be careful what I'm saying. I have to rethink. I've changed things now. I have not that much time, therefore I will go quickly into the presentation, and I have not had as much time as I wanted to prepare this because there's a virus going on. You might have heard of that one, and I had it. So I still have it, actually. I still test positive, but I'm fine, and it should be over very soon. So can you, if you can nod, please, and see if you see the slide, the first one? Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. First of all, thanks to particularly Ursula and Haris, who have, together with me, coordinated all this work about getting the profiles together. And I would like to give you some brief overview of some of the findings from this research and other research we did as part of LDnet. If it moves forward, yes, as Harry said, 21 profiles have been done and others are in the pipeline, will soon be published. So hopefully we get a full picture of the EU. These are short summaries, and their advantage is that they cover, they follow the same structure. So you have comparative information as much as possible. Of course, the perspectives are a bit different and the times when things were done, but it should be a great resource. And there's the link, and you can easily find it on the website of LDnet. Something that many of you will find boring, and you probably know much better than I do, but I think it's important to get the context of all this, because I see some very well-known names here who probably a much better place to talk about this. But I wanted to point out the trajectory where LIDA is going, or CLLD is going, where it came from and where it is heading. So, or where it might be heading in this program period 21-27, you see here the various stages and years and which funds were used, which were very diverse. And you see particularly one number that goes up from top to bottom, and that's the number of local action groups, which become more and more and more. And you see important steps in this development, which brought us here. And one is, I would say, the mainstreaming in 2007. And then suddenly we had the fisheries legs added to the leader groups. And then in 2014, crucially, the cohesion policy funds added to the selection of funds that can potentially be used. And this opened up CLLD as a tool for all territories, and became one of those so-called territorial instruments in cohesion policy. And this, I think, has been somewhat of a game changer. And this will continue. It will be continued. There's a bit of a separation of these tool of CLLD from LIDA, at least formally. Let's see how this works in practice, how this will continue. But there's also an advantage. CLLD will count into, as an urban expression, will count into the obligatory minimum funding that has to be dedicated to urban areas. So this could be a push for CLLD in some cases. This is a confusing table that I show you. You can find it on the website, and it is still developing. I changed it this morning, so it is 99% correct. There are 3,335 local action groups, plus minus 1%, I would say, and there's all sorts of combination. It's a very diverse, and in the full sense of community-led, it's a bottom-up approach. So in every country, it's different, and there's all sorts of combinations. And particularly if you look at the map, it is different in terms of the coverage of countries. So everything that is gray, different shades of gray, without going to the detail of the map, but the gray means this is LIDA and or fishery legs, or a combination of both. So these are just, without being negative, just the old models without addition of any new funds. Where there is color, there is some sort of inclusion of the cohesion policy funds, ERDF, ESF, in various possible combinations. And it's important to note that in many cases, we need to look at the subnational level, at the region. So it's often the case that specific regions, not just in federal states, federal member states, where particular regions go their own way, Sachsen-Anhalt, Puglia, parts of the Netherlands, etc. So I think this is important to point out. And thanks to Loris, who I don't think is here, because he did this map, Loris Sevillo.
He should be here.
Stefan.
Yes.
Can you go to previous slide?
Yes, sure.
We need to update the information for Croatia. It's empty.
Yes, there. That's true. That's
we
true.
We are in a gray area.
Yes,
gray
you should be
area.
gray. You shouldn't be white. Good point. Yeah. So would be good
light gray, light gray.
No, that's important actually. That's I never paid notice that. We'll fix that. I'll ask Loris to fix it.
Thanks.
Good point. Yes, I think there are two types of expansions going on, or have been going on over the past program periods, particularly in the move from 7.13 to 14.20. One is thematically, the other one is territorial. Let's look at the thematic expansion. Obviously, we have more funds. So we have the social fund, we have the region development fund. So suddenly there's an opportunity to do different things. And in many countries, this opportunity was picked up. Here's the example of Sweden, how they mix the different funds. And there continue to be a core element, continue to be the typical leader activities, which are listed here, value to local products, territorial marketing, agriculturally based activities. But now you have new themes that can be tackled in a community-led way, mobility, social inclusion, etc. When looking at the country profiles, I think we can identify the difference between two basic models, which are not necessarily exclusive. They're probably mixed of the two as well. So some that are more prescriptive, where the managing authority pretty much defines what can be funded. And in other cases, this is more left to the local action groups to decide themselves what are the best suited themes to pursue. Also, we can distinguish between a more sector-focused approach, where the focus continues to be on the traditional fields of agriculture and fisheries, which is something that is defined at level of program of the managing authorities. In other cases, the diversification is at the center of the activity. So to look at other activities in the various territories. Or another way of looking at this, is it more about focusing on private investments in some countries, and in others, it's more about focusing on public investments, mainly on infrastructure related measures. The second trend we can observe by going back is a territorial expansion. Only with 2014-20, which we are looking at, there are no limits to the territorial coverage. Before, you were limited to rural areas or to local or coastal fisheries areas, and now you can pretty much implement local action groups to set them up anywhere you want to. This creates a situation that in some countries, you have 100% coverage, or in some regions. That's the case in Kujawsko-Pomorskie, but also in Slovenia, where not necessarily all the territory is covered, but at least all the municipalities are covered. And you see some maps below. You can see gaps in some countries, but these gaps are probably in all countries smaller than they were in 2007-13. These gaps are shrinking. You see relatively large gaps in some of the German Länder, and on the top right here, you see very, very tiny gaps in Czechia, where only individual municipalities are not taking part. And you see Slovenia, where there are no gaps at all. Only at sub-municipal level, with certain territories in the larger cities are excluded, but every municipality is part of some sort of local action group. One particular element of this territorial expansion is the expansion to urban territories. This is really new. This is something that has never been the case. So, and this has only been taken up in 7 countries, also to a different extent. In the Netherlands, there's only one experimental case, if you want, and a more comprehensive approach in countries such as Hungary or Romania. And here you see in the table, there are 223 of those local action groups, and the different ways of mixing the funds. And in most cases, it's about using both ERDF and ESF, but in almost all cases, ESF is used, whether on its own or together with ERDF. Just in the one case in the Netherlands, they don't use ESF. So the social aspect, the social dimension of local development is particularly emphasized, and through urban local action groups. And we can distinguish 2 different types of target territories of urban local action groups. And one is looking at the municipal level, looking at districts in certain cities. Obviously, in larger cities, this is most appropriate. So we have this example of Lisbon, but also The Hague, and in some of the larger Eastern European cities like Bucharest, Timișoara, Miskolc in Hungary. Or we look at entire cities. These then obviously are often smaller towns. And indeed, in places such as Hungary, there's a small map there. but also in Lithuania and in Romania, some of the cities are actually rather smallish towns and going down to sizes of 12, 15,000 inhabitants. There's also a third category.
Stefan, sorry,
Yes.
can I ask you something?
Yes, please.
If you compare it with the integrated territorial tool for urban development,
Yes.
What's the difference if we use the tools through logs according to cohesion policy, and if you use it from integrated territorial urban some tool? That's the problem that we have in Croatia. We cannot understand, our managing authorities cannot understand the problem, but actually the methodology is the same.
But well, it's not exactly the same though, because if I can just add, if you look at ITI or the other variants of the sustainable urban development strategies, there is no requirement for a participative approach in those. And in fact, what you often see is that the municipality exercises the authority to decide to do what it wishes to do, but without really the same rule-based system that you have with CLLD, where the public sector must have a minority interest in the partnership. And I think this is the crucial difference between because obviously there are much bigger funds being dispersed, especially in the Central and Eastern European countries, under the all three variants. So you can have ITI, you can have a integrated territorial investment, or a priority axis, or you can have a whole program for your city. But there is no requirement in that to be genuinely participative, and certainly no rule about a minority action. I'll stop.
Yeah,
okay.
Thanks, Peter.
Sorry, there was, I think Katalin has raised his hand, but then lower down, he just said it's top down or versus bottom up. I don't know, Katalin, do you want to come in, jump in quickly, or not anymore?
Yes, if you allow me. It's just like Peter said, the CLLD is very much bottom up with the organization and the citizens that are working on a strategy, and the integrated mechanism is top down, when the authorities come with the strategy and enforce it on an area. That's the difference.
It's a pretty strong way of formulating it.
Yes, a strong way of formulating it. And it is also, it is actually, that's why ITI can be more attractive from a managing authority perspective. But also to defend their view is, if you think of the larger ITIs covering entire cities or functional areas of more than one city, as often is the case, in most cases actually, or in Czechia, for instance, how would community-led approaches work if you're talking about the population of 1.5 million? How do you organize this? Do you think of small pockets? I think CLLD approaches live from the closeness of actors. They require a community that can be targeted and work with each other, unless you think of maybe having then maybe 20 or 30 communities working all together in one larger ITI structure. So it's not always CLLD is the ideal way forward. I think that to defend the view to use ITIs instead of CLLD, but I agree, it's an easy way out maybe of avoiding having to use the CL element of CLLD. But yeah, interesting thought, and I think this came from Bojana, right? Yes, we'll exchange about this at some point. We'll have some questions.
Thanks, because it's a really thin line between those.
And there are cases where these overlap. In Portugal, for instance, and many other places where in the same territory, the same municipality is part of a larger ITI, is also part of a CLLD. And they need to find ways of coordinating this. And there's an example in Portugal, I don't know whether anyone knows this, where they very pragmatically said, okay, any investment up to 100,000 will be done by CLLD, up from 100,000 will cover through ITI. If the same fund is used, ERDF, for instance.
Yes, which is very clear demarcation.
Which is clear, but is it, well, it's a bit artificial as well. So, but it requires coordination and delimitation, I guess.
Yeah.
Good. No, that's good that people show interest. That's good.
Sorry.
If you have questions, no, very good. Please raise your hand or just say something. I need to move on, and just saying that also there are other contexts which are urban, but not necessarily formally, because like the case of Gothenburg, where we're talking about an outskirt of the city, which is in functional terms part of the city, but it's considered rural. So the rural fund still operates, but it's an urban context. Similarly, the Slovenian cities have have areas which are part of Ljubljana, Maribor, and so on, and are targeted by a rural local action group, which is interesting by saying this is a rural area, this is an urban one, but one can discuss how much this is really the case. It creates some specific challenges for urban local action groups because they usually deal with one municipality. It's different from leader or fisheries legs, where you have usually a whole group of 5, 10, 20, 50 local action groups, and the balance of power, if you just deal with one, might be a very different one. Just to say that I will not go into detail because of the time. Still, leader and flags remain the preferred models of implementing CLLD. So 3/4 of the money comes from the Rural Development Fund. Over 2/3 of local action groups are either leader groups or flags as well, even if they use other funds. And only 800 of them, so still a high number, but only 800 use some sort of cohesion policy funding. So the picture is still very much dominated by those established models, so to say. I'm getting towards the end. So some of the key messages, there are many messages that can be found. And the two first here, I think, are relatively obvious, and you might have heard them many, many times. The third one is maybe more provocative. First one, there is no European model of CLD. Yes, not too surprising, but I think it's important to keep in mind these national contexts of democratic traditions, existing domestic models for local development. That's why maybe the European ones are not as attractive or as suitable. I'd also think about the time when LEADER was entering the scene, what was going on in each country, and which might have impacted how certain things were implemented or not. And often it's the regional contexts which are just as important or even more important, and not just in the typically federal states where everything is done differently in different parts of the member state anyway, but the regional ones show there's great variation, as you can see, if you remember the map, where it places some regions in Italy or in Germany go different way than others, or in Poland. Implementation experiences are mixed, to be polite, and sometimes frustrating. We heard about this. We know there have been delays, many delays. It was new, particularly when it was about the multi-fund aspect, to involve new actors, new ministries or managing authorities. And the usual thing of administrative burden and capacities remains a key concern. This is something that we saw pretty much in all the country profiles. And this is something that needs to be addressed, but this is something not new, no surprise here. What I think, in my view, is an interesting thing that maybe is not explored or discussed as much is that the number of local action groups is continuously increasing. If you remember the numbers going from 200 to 800 to 2,000 now to 3,500, and who knows what's happening. If there's a reduction, it's probably only because the UK is out. So it will be even higher. And I wonder whether there are consequences for the quality of strategies and interventions. If you select everyone that wants money, if you have 100% coverage, if pretty much come up with a strategy, you get funding, is there still a competitive selection procedure in place, or is it just different? And how is this a one-way street? Can you actually reduce your map? Can you tell someone who has been benefiting for 1, 2, 3 program periods, nah, you don't get anything anymore, this is not good enough? Can you do this? Is it politically possible? And innovation, is it still going on? LEADER was supposed to be about innovation, or is it now increasingly replacing other EU or domestic policies and funding streams? Because there's a LEADER pot, let's use it for things, and then it saves us using our own money to do this. These are, I think, an important aspect, and I don't know whether there's time to discuss this. I have this last slide, just 4 things I think there's no problem having a discussion. I see you're interested, I saw a raised hand. But how will CLLD change? Most countries will continue. Some will change or give up, at least the multi-fund aspect. Some will enter, who knows? I have only anecdotal evidence so far. Multi-fund versus mono-fund. We always talk about multi-fund, but maybe mono-fund using a different fund is the way forward. How about just using an ERDF fund or just using ESF for any social issues in the city? You don't have to mix. Mixing is complicated. This is one lesson we've heard. Urban and social focus. This is maybe the new thing for 1420. Could it be also something that could be explored further in 2127? Is it worth it? From your perspective as practitioners and experts, and what about the other things going on in parallel? Smart villages and certain let's say tools or movements of participatory budgeting. Is this something that is relevant and it should be more relevant for local development? So these are just 4 points, and that's me. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Stefan. I think we already have Simona who raised her hand a while ago, and she was very, very patient. So maybe we'll just let her speak right away.
First of all,
Simona?
thank you very much. It was a very, very interesting presentation, and I didn't see, and I was not correctly so, because Stefan also included the urban lags. And for instance, what I think it's making connection between them, it's me, because I was working and am working with all of them. But of course, this is not at all relevant. What I would like to say here is the fact that under the Rural Development Program, AKI's leader intend and have this, let's say, pilot idea, of course, with also building for the first time the multi-fund here. It was not at all, it was avoided as much as possible, but they would like to have a special bonding and partnership with between rural legs and urban legs, and targeting especially the peri-urban areas. Because when it's possible, of course, in small and medium-sized cities, and this could be possible. And this is not only an intention, because they put in place, for instance, to be tested, some procedures on who is leading, which fund is leading, under what circumstances, how to, let's see how and in what way this will be, let's say, total failure, comme ci, comme ça, and or maybe some success. But it's a huge change, I would say, as compared to the former period. Thank you.
It's not a question
as such. Do you want to react?
Yes, I just comment that I think Romania is a great case to take this further, because of this of the very structured approach to all three strands of local development with your associations of rural, of fisheries, and of urban. And there's no other country with an association of urban legs and such a structured approach. And Catalin, I see he has his hand raised. So I think this is a great thing, and it's something that should be ideally explored somewhere else. But where there are no urban legs, then maybe they're lacking the partner from the rural perspective to looking at the city. But it doesn't have to be a leg, I would imagine. It could be someone else. But these linkages, I think, would be great.
Yeah, indeed. We'll just go straight maybe to Catalin and his question or his comment.
Yes, I would like to thank very much Stefan for his effort, because it's quite a heterogeneous zone, this one with urban legs, and he did a great effort by collecting all the data and speaking with a lot of them. I know he was a lot of on our head with collecting data and everything, but it was quite a pleasure doing that. And I think that is a lot of work to do in this area, as combining and promoting the urban legs, because there are areas. We had yesterday actually a meeting, and we heard about areas that urban legs were to be not to be founded from 2024 forward, and it will be quite a loss if their historical and their experience would be lost. So we could gather much data as we can in these 2 years actually that remains from their implementation, in which maybe we can gather as much information as we can in order to save as much as we can from their experience. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so that was more a comment than a question, I understand. Further points, questions, comments?
Hello, here is Marian.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
ahead.
I am on the road, so I don't have the raise the hand function. Hello, everybody. I was just thinking, just a comment that Stefan said that he thinks that there will be less lags only because of the Brexit. I'm not sure, because I see in many countries that that now the governments are aiming to make bigger local action groups. Like, for example, in Sweden, we are going from, I don't know, 53 to 44 or something like that, because they are reducing the number of lags and making them bigger, actually, top down. And I think that is the case maybe in Denmark. I heard, I think, something similar from Portugal, I'm not sure, and from several different countries. So that could be the case. And then another thing I was thinking about was seeing smart villages as something separate from leader, I think is a mistake. I think that's very intertwined. But I really appreciate Stefan's presentation. I heard it, parts of it several times before, and I really like it. Thank you very much.
So I hope I didn't copy or repeat too much. Sorry. But yeah, thanks. Good points. Also, the bigger thing is, I think also in Austria it's being discussed, or that at least maybe not possible, but discussed. Question is though, does it in the end end up in just a lower number of lags, but still a larger territory? You know, that could be, or the territory where we won't go down. You just accumulate them into larger entities. But good point to observe. I'm looking forward to see the figures in 5 years when selection is done, or in 7, considering how long it always takes.
I have actually a question as well, or let's say a point to be perhaps discussed still. You said, Stefan, that one of the issues with the growing number of lags, that we have more and more and more of lags, is that you no longer actually have a competitive process of selection, but that you, I guess you know what I'm going to say, but I always question the need to have competitive selection, because the idea is really not to give money to those who deserve it best, or can use it to best effect. Yes, that is one of the reasons, but you also want to help those who are maybe not so capable. And I always remember this Finnish example where the Finnish managing authority at some point said, we are no longer comparing better lag strategies with worse lag strategies. We will work with all the lags to improve their strategies, and that's the approach that was taken. I think it's an interesting question, at least.
Yes, I know
not
that
to take for granted.
Yes, I know that we had this discussion in some other context before, and I think there's a danger of those who know how to play the system, who know how to write a good strategy, whether that they will gain, and those who actually would deserve would need from a good strategy are not able to get their things together, and then they would not get funded. That's not a result that we would hope for. But I think there are ways to address this, and there's not exactly focusing on leader, but in Poland there's this center for administrative support or capacity building, or whatever it's called, which is focusing on those disadvantaged areas. I think it's mainly for towns, but I'm not entirely sure. But basically supporting the public entities, territorial actors in the area in participating in these circles. So to support them in writing proposals and in developing strategies, particularly focus on the weak ones. I think that's probably, there are similar examples in other countries, I'm not so sure, to reach the difficult to reach ones.
And that was the other point I really wanted to raise, and I think it is extremely important, is this whole issue of networking and capacity building. The example you give from Poland is actually, it is a network of cities that have set up their own organization, and that organization is helping them. But ideally, and I think the strength of LEADER and the strength of fisheries groups was that there was organized, systematic networking and capacity building support at the EU level and at the national level. And the fact, as several people said, there's no urban lag support. There's no, well, the urban lag network is a completely, as I understand, bottom-up initiative. And I think that it will be extremely difficult to extend and the funding of ESF and the RDF, and to reach to those who have the lower capacity and help them benefit from CLLD funding without a systematic networking and capacity building activity at the European level by DG Employment or DG Regio and at the national level. I think Sweden was partly using the leader network, the national rural network, to provide support to the leader groups and to the rural and other groups. But I think that's very exceptional. Nobody else has thought to do that, and that's a major, I think, lack in my opinion. That was just a comment. I don't know if you want.
Yeah.
And Ernesto has a question, but maybe you want
just
to
one
react.
point that I wanted to add to this. There would be opportunities through the TAIEX peer-to-peer, for instance, tool, and there have been examples where this has been used in the area of CLLD, where basically policymakers were visiting other countries or exchanging with other actors in other countries and looking at CLLD and what to learn, how to build up their own CLLD model. So, but it's a bit niche maybe, and it's more ad hoc, and someone has to take the initiative, but some structure would obviously be much better. Yeah. Sorry,
okay, Ernesto.
Yeah.
Yes, let's go maybe to Ernesto, who's keeping his hand raised already.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Thank you to Stefan. It was always interesting to see, to be refreshed on the figures. Now that we had the occasion to discuss with Thematically, which is in the group of the Unit European Commission who developed the long vision for the rural strategy, and we were speaking about this in a international meeting organized by Uniscape in Florence a couple of months ago, and at the end of the discussion, Thematically reasoned this issue, which is a huge problem in rural development is the building capacity of municipalities, local managing authorities, and now with the push of recovery funds, which are questioning all the single member states to find the building capacity to spend those money, or the presidency, Ms. von der Leyen recalled one day and the other the same, the member states come up with a plan and so forth, so on. And at least I'm speaking for Italy, but all the local authorities which I spoke with, they are very concerned about that, because they know they are about to receive money, but they don't know how to set up a team of people able to have the building capacity for spending that money. This is something which could risk to block first the lower level of spending, the indirect funds. This is a big concern also for the Commission, but no one, at least for the units working in rural development, no one knows how to fix this. But this will be, I think, a huge problem in the forthcoming months.
Definitely, yes. And I think that we need, well, there's not much we can do about it, but we need at least to raise it and keep reminding people that has to be addressed. I think Enrique also has a hand raised, and I don't know, Enrique, do you want to show your face if you can? And
well, I'm in the street, sorry.
Okay, no worries.
But I wanted to just add one point. I think there is a very good opportunity with the whole movement at European level around the long-term vision for rural areas. I think the Commission is sending a very clear message that the future of rural area goes beyond the traditional sectoral approach, and it needs to be enlarged to other sectors. I think within this new context, member states
It's gone.
In a holistic and transversal way. So there is a lot of scope to work at the national level, because the Commission will not do more than just leading by example. Let's remember that this communication doesn't come from DG Agri. It comes from the Vice President and comes from the orientation of demography and democracy. So for me, the message is clear at European level to all the countries. Now, within that context, I think also there is an important exercise to be done by all the leader and CLLD community itself to really be an instrumental tool that is able to support all the holistic and integrated development that the Commission is launching. I think here we are talking about really sectorial areas that, or thematic fields that LDnet is not traditionally accustomed to work on. Let's talk about, for instance, mobility. I don't think there are many projects, LDnet projects dealing with mobility. They're talking about social care, etc. So there are many fields where even LDnet lacks and so on need to build capacities. And this goes in line with modern approaches to bring territorial innovation. So for me, I think there is a kind of a need for the CLLD community as well to evolve and to adapt to the LDnet methodology to modern times. So it can also be a tool for innovation in all these areas that now the Commission are calling that are relevant for the future of rural areas. Beyond beyond the good work that the LDnet groups have done already within their ministries of agriculture in most of the countries.
Okay.
Sorry, just an opinion to generate debate.
Thanks a lot, Enrique. And I'm beginning to feel extremely guilty because I can see that compared to the interest that this presentation has raised and your contributions, we have absolutely allocated way too little time for that. And I'm really worried that the way we have planned our meeting, we're going to have to draw the discussion to a close. So I will definitely let Kim say something because he's had his hand raised, but then we have to start wrapping up. Kim?
Okay, hello. So I definitely raised my hand at good moment. So anyway, hello, Kim from Prepare Partnership, and also taking a note of what Pedro just mentioned in the chat, and a reaction to what Enrique just said about what the Commission is doing. The Commission is definitely doing a good job in trying to get the integrative approach to rural development. Then when we come to the Rural Observatory or to the Rural Pact, for instance, if the Rural Pact is similar to the Urban Pact, so it's not really a pact, it's not really an agreement. And about rural proofing as well, if this is something that we're trying to work on, it depends so much on the member states whether they're going to accept these tools kind of going forward in the direction the Commission is so well working towards. So positive, but a little bit skeptical as well as to what it will become, whether in the Rural Observatory, for instance, if citizens would have any word in that, because I'm not sure that is going to happen. But sorry for creating maybe confusion and more discussion topics, but back to Ursula or somebody else.
Well, no, thanks a lot. I think it's this traditional discussion between an optimist and a pessimist. I mean, it's a great thing that the Commission has taken rural matters seriously. It's the fact that it has come from civil society may mean that it will not be taken that seriously enough at member state level. Sure, that we need to have more discussion on that. I think I'm really sorry, and there's a huge wealth of ideas also in the chat, which we will try to save and publish. I just have to say, before I let Stefan have the very last comment, if he wants to, I mean, that's up to you, Stefan. Just one maybe way of, let's say, not to regret too much that we have to finish here, is to give you another opportunity. We are going to have a session in the RSA e-Festival on the 24th of March. Most probably, we'll still publish the information on our website, which will focus very much on the ESF and CLLD under ESF, but there will also be comparison with how it's going in other funds. And I think some of your comments and some of your concerns can resurface, can come back in that discussion. So we're not just stopping here, we'll continue that discussion in a few weeks' time. Stefan, do you just want to a last comment or points, or we just move to the next point?
Yeah, maybe one point is that the material that we have built up, and this is not yet finished, but it's so rich, and we have not had the opportunity, also have to blame it on COVID, to really use it all. And there will be more that we can extract, I think, I hope, and we should. So stay tuned.
And yes, one thing I wanted really to say, and that's just many thanks to those of you who have contributed to creating those profiles, you've given us information from the different member states. Without your help, we wouldn't have been able to do them. So thanks a lot. And we rely on further comments and further updates from you. All right. Well, in that case, we have to move on to the next point of the agenda, which hopefully will be equally interesting and provocative. And that's what LDnet can do and what our vision is and where we should focus our activities. And then there I hand over to Peter Ramsden, our Vice President, to lead the discussion.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ursula. And how does that work? I don't know if all of you were aware of this, but and in fact, this builds very neatly on the previous discussion, because it's interesting that despite CLLD existing across all the ESIF funds over the last period since 2014, no one has actually done what we have done, and we are unfunded to do this. So no one at Commission level has actually tried to track what is happening and cover. I mean, there have been interesting studies, and Loris Civillo has done one very good one a few years ago, but no one has looked across all the territories. So I don't know if all of you knew this, but back in the depths of 2021, towards the end of 2021, we initiated a small consultation about what should be our mission. We'd reached the stage of having existed for 10 years. And we thought, what should we do now? And how should we sort of try to characterize what we exist to do, and what are we for? And we produced this statement about the unique feature of LDnet. And I'll read it first, and then we can discuss it. So the unique feature of LDnet is our interest in local development across all types of territory. I've got good, I've moved it. Across all types of territory, rural, coastal, urban, mountains, and islands, and across a wide range of themes, from its origin in social inclusion, job creation, and local economic development, to more recent concerns about climate change, the circular economy, and digital transition. It goes on to say, so that's a mixture of talking about the territories that we cover and the types of themes where we recognize that there's a shift from some which were core at the beginning to new ones which have become more pressing. The second paragraph, LDnet acts as a bridge between experts, researchers, activists, and policymakers in a wide range of public, private, and third sector organizations. Geographically, our main focus is the EU member states, plus Norway and Switzerland, the EU candidate countries, Western Balkans and Turkey, the neighborhood countries, e.g. Eastern Partnership, Maghreb, Middle East, UK, and beyond. So that looks at where geographically we're most interested. So although, for example, we're interested in what happens in Asia or the United States and Latin America, we're focusing really on Europe and its environs. So third paragraph, our aim is to position participative, integrated, and sustainable local development approaches at the core of designing, implementing, and evaluating economic, social, and environmental development policies at all levels of governance. And finally, to achieve this aim, we need to work to engage with new partners and to bring on board the next generation of activists and policy entrepreneurs, which I seem to have lost the last few letters of. So that was achieved through, there was a first draft, and then there were many iterations where people made suggestions about the wording, and we're still open. This is a draft. We're still open to taking on board new ideas about what our mission should be. But to some extent, this has more or less settled as our idea of what we need to be focusing on. I'm going to stop screen sharing for a moment because it's slightly confusing.
While you do that, maybe I will respond to, I think, Robert's question in the chat. This vision statement is actually already on our website, so you can find it. It's currently, I think it's in the invitation to the General Assembly, but you will probably have it so that it can be found easily and people can access it and have a look. Back to you, Peter.
Someone's just said an interesting place where the EU has ended up, where the UK has ended up.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's just realpolitik in the sense that the UK comes after candidate countries, after Switzerland and Norway, and has decided to relegate itself roughly to the level of Turkey. But we're still very interested, obviously, and some of us are from the UK, and we're still very interested in things that go on. And I noticed that the new Levelling Up paper has been published today in the United Kingdom. So good luck with that. Anyone want to comment or anything about the mission statement? If I was to make one comment, I think myself, it's that there is some maturity around, particularly around CLLD, and particularly around CLLD in fisheries, coastal and rural areas. But we still haven't really made the step needed in urban areas to bring in genuinely participative approaches across the delivery of cohesion policy. And for me, as an urban expert, that's a priority for the future. And I've been talking to Catalin and a few others, Stefan as well, about how that might be done. But clearly, this idea that we're the sole organization that really is interested in all the different forms of local development that take place, not just CLLD itself as a European Commission structure or policy approach, but all its forms, and in all these geographies that we've mentioned. I'm just going to look at the messages. And someone saying, yeah, inhabitants. Yes, we wrote activists, but inhabitants might not want to participate without taking on that label. And this is from Kirsten Berg in Denmark. I presume some hubs, for instance, the Sherpa, are similar. Or Kirsten, do you want to just elaborate on that if you're online still?
No, it's just that, thank you. It's very relevant, your bridging model. I love it, but it's so important, and hopefully you will make them see sense. But it is, for me, important that the inhabitants are allowed to be there as just inhabitants and not as activists. Thank you.
I suppose the reason we mentioned activists is because activists are the ones who are likely to make contact. Clearly, local development exists for all the inhabitants in any territory, but we can't really, unless they, by an activist, I mean someone who actually shows up, someone who participates, who joins in, and maybe that it's the wrong label, but that's the reason we mention that rather than. But we could possibly extend it to inhabitants. I'll extend that, let other people think about that.
Maybe we need to rephrase this. Maybe depending on the culture, maybe activists not a very acceptable term. Maybe we should look at, I don't know, active citizens or something going in that direction. But we'll I think in terms of rephrasing, we'll probably be able to.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether
just. I see Alexandru is also nodding his head, so probably.
I mean, we could possibly in the last paragraph mention also civil society organizations.
I find inhabitants quite okay. Because activist is quite strong worded from, in some context, it has some historical connotations.
Yeah, we will think about that and try to. We have already jiggled with some of the terminology, and we're still prepared to do it. But the main thing is to be clear that the big, let's say, strands of our vision that you were generally agreeing with, that you don't find there something that strikes you as being wrong or going in the wrong direction.
Okay, well, I mean, I think we're more or less up to time on this. Let's, I mean, we'll continue to be open for a limited period. I'm not sure how long on comments. We'll take on board this question about how best to represent, whether activist is the right word and whether we need to broaden it in some way. I think it would be a shame to lose it altogether, but we can perhaps add something to it, would be my personal view. But we'll have an ongoing discussion about that, and you're very, very welcome to make further comments, particularly once the chat is over, by email. So I think we'll draw this to a close, but I think more broadly, the statement represents quite an ambitious, but also quite a clear statement of where we're at. And I think that's helpful for the organization in terms of thinking about the next decade. Thank you.
Many thanks, Peter, and thanks generally for your efforts trying to give us a focus and a direction, and also working on our fundraising mechanisms and so on. So that's really very much appreciated. Don't know if there are any further points to be raised before we move on to the official part of re-electing the board. Is there anything we have missed, Harris, or that we need to mention beforehand?